Hey guys, Happy New Year. This is the first video made after the death of Jimmy Carter. I just want to say I feel bad for his family, and I'm proud of the work that he did in the world. And I was very uh, heartbroken when he died because no one deserves that, especially a person like him who helped many different people throughout the world. Anyway, so the topic for today's video is going to be if Gerald Ford won the election of 1976 against Jimmy Carter instead of what happened in our timeline, and how that would change the political realm in America's history. In the 1976 election, there was basically three reasons why Gerald Ford and the Republicans lost. Number one, the pardoning of Nixon and the whole Watergate scandal. Two, it's because of Ford barely winning the primaries against Ronald Reagan. And three, his poor debate performance against Jimmy Carter. Although we can't change the first issue of Gerald Ford pardoning Nixon and the unpopularity of the Republican Party, we could have Gerald Ford campaign a little bit more in the primaries and getting a little bit more of a comfortable lead in the primaries, allowing more conservatives who supported Reagan to vote out in the 1976 general election. And we could also have Gerald Ford spend a little bit more time away from the government and a little bit more time on debate practice so he doesn't have the gaffe of what he said when he said that Eastern Europe wasn't dominated by the Soviet Union when it was. In our timeline, Jimmy Carter did win the popular vote by a larger margin than it was perceived in the Electoral College. However, there were very close states like Texas and Ohio. So if we fix these issues, I feel that Gerald Ford could win the election. However, he would probably lose the popular vote still, but in a closer margin, and that would energize a lot of liberals during his next 4 years to be really against him and his policies. So I feel like the energy crisis and the Iran revolution and the Iran hostage crisis would still happen within his 4 years, which would damage the Republican image and Ford's popularity. Now, his vice presidential candidate, who would be the vice president during these 4 years in our time or in our new timeline, would be Bob Dole. However, with his connections to Gerald Ford, he probably won't be a pick in the 1980 election, and I feel like Ronald Reagan would have more of a chance to winning the Republican nomination for 1980, since the Republicans would probably be a little bit more desperate. Hey, maybe even they could have Bob Dole run as vice president again. However, I believe that more liberal Democrat candidates would win based on the unpopularity of the administration at the time. And I feel like Ted Kennedy would probably win the nomination for the Democrats, and he would pick Walter Mondale to energize those who were angry against Gerald Ford, because Jimmy Carter won the popular vote and not Ford. So, and also that Walter Mondale is a centrist, so I feel like Ted Kennedy would have a comfortable lead in the Electoral College in the popular vote and win 1980. Based on this win, he would still also probably win the 1984 election, and instead of the 1980s kind of conservative times that we would have in our original timeline, now based on this election, we'd probably have a more liberal era dominated by Democrats during the decade. So, with Ted Kennedy winning re-election in 1988, we could probably see Walter Mondale running based on his experience in the 1988 election, or we could have Lloyd Bentsen, an even more centrist Democrat, trying to run in 1988 like he did in our timeline for the vice presidency in that election. And because they're whatever president nominee you choose, they're both centrist, and based on the popularity that the Democrats would still have, because the 80s were just a general great time for whoever was the incumbent, they would probably still win the 1988 election based on who was in office. The Democrats would still be popular based on the end of the Cold War and their keeping a lot of their policies that they would have. I could see that it would be a close election in 1992, but I feel like based on Ross Perot and the brief recession during the time, I feel that the Democrats would lose, and a Republican nominee like maybe even Bob Dole or Pat Buchanan would win the 1992 election. So based on the Republicans being in office during our timeline's Republican Revolution, the Republican Revolution in Congress would probably be a lot smaller based on incumbency bias and probably the Republicans being perceived as bad during that time, like Clinton was during that time, and a lot of bills would not be passed because Democrats would be in control of Congress. However, based on the revolution, the next 2 years between 1994 and 1996 would pass smoothly for whoever was in office, and they would still probably win in 1996 because the 90s were also a good time in America, like the 80s, and whoever was the incumbent had a good chance of winning re-election. I would also say that Republicans could win in 2000 and 2004. However, it would be very close margins. I'm talking about like maybe 280 electoral votes or even a smaller victory count. Because in 2000, it was always going to be close in 2000. But however, the Republicans didn't have a Bill Clinton in office, so the president who could be perceived as like an okay president and a guy who would campaign for whoever was running in 2000, and after that, whoever was in office would probably win in 2004 based on the war on terror and how people trusted whoever was in charge to take care of them. Like the Democrat candidates would definitely win in 2008 and 2012 based on the war on terror still raging on and the recession that would still happen in our timeline. The probable candidate that would run is probably Barack Obama, with him winning in 2008 and 2012 like he did in our timeline. However, in 2016, it could be a little different. It would basically be on if they had a candidate very different on Hillary Clinton, like the Democrats, since they could probably win based on uh, having a candidate who didn't have as many as scandals as Clinton had. I could see Bernie Sanders trying to win based on more liberalism than Barack Obama at the time. And I could see the Democrats winning. However, people did want to change, so I could see a Republican winning at the same time. I would say that it would definitely be very close, and it would matter on a couple of swing states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania specifically. I could see Mitt Romney winning in 2016 by the closest margins ever, and still probably losing the popular vote like Trump did in 2016. It's just that people voted for change, and like feel like Mitt Romney really did display that, but not in 2012, but maybe in 2016 if he did run in our new timeline. Whoever was in office in the 2020 election would definitely have their party lose in the 2020 election, considering COVID was a really big factor of Republicans losing on a timeline, and it would be really hard for if the Republicans won or if the Democrats won for their image to be changed based on a recession and like sickness and people voting on. People vote on change all the time, so I would say that the Democrats would probably win if a Republican like Mitt Romney was in office in 2020. However, based on the same timeline that we have right now, I could also see Republicans winning in 2024, like someone like Ron DeSantis or Chris Christie or Marco Rubio could probably run in 2024, and they could probably win maybe a little bit smaller margins than we had in 2024, but I could see the change bias based on previous elections. So that's what I got to say about 2024. Summary, I just gotta say every election has like matters and it will always change our future. So that's why there could be a drastic change based on who's elected. It doesn't matter which election, there's always a future to believe in for different people. And that's why I personally encourage people to vote and people to learn about their candidates so people are voting for their candidates and voting and not voting against another candidate. Because I feel like when we vote, we should vote for who we want, not who is against who we don't want. So that's going to be it, you guys. It's the political kid here, and have a happy 2025.